So, what is this mysterious relationship X? Let's start by describing it a little bit. So, you are in a relationship X, most likely, if you feel that there is something wrong with your relationship, but you can't really describe what's wrong. It's kind of an inner sense, but you can't really put your finger on. However, there are some distinct symptoms, I would say, traits that you are likely noticing. So, the first one is that relationship X is usually something that starts with a lot of passion. It's like the love of your life. You're really into this person. You really have feelings for them. You're really getting some feedback. You feel like you're at the top of the world with this person. However, as the time goes on, what you notice that this relationship becomes extremely stressful. So you go from a passion to this sense of that there is something wrong with it, and you don't know what this wrong is. And the dynamics continues. One day everything's great, you're really thankful to have that person in your life, you really click. The next day you're ready to run away from home. You are done, you can't take it anymore. The sense of wrong is overwhelming and you feel like you're not handling it. And so when that happens, people say, well, that's kind of typical. The old adage thing about men, you can't live with them, you can't live without them. So it's not how it is for everybody. But it really isn't. And the difference is the scale, because in your case, it's a flipping roller coaster emotionally. This is not a roller coaster. This is kind of fun. Your relationship is. So it's not so much what is going on, it's the degree of the ups and downs. Another system, I'm sorry, another symptom of relationship X is that you tend to find yourself bending over backwards for that person. You're really going out of your way to help them and you feel motivated to do this. You want to be there for them. You want them to be happy. You really do everything you can to maintain this relationship. And it goes on 24/7, but the harder you try, the behinder you get. So you put all the effort you can into trying to fix the problem. The problem is not fixing itself, and the dynamics seem to start getting worse and worse and worse as you go along. And so, a lot of times in those situations when we can't fix something and things um, keep getting worse, regardless of the amount of effort, we go to marriage counselors, right? But as soon as you sit down with a marriage counselor and explain the dynamics, and you hope for them to see what's going on and pinpoint what the problem is, and the response is that you are the problem. So wait a minute, I am bending over backwards. There is not something that I haven't done yet. However, marriage counselors side with them, and supposedly you are not doing enough. You are unfair, you're selfish, you're insensitive, you're doing things wrong, and you have been kind of questioning if that is really the case with you already. So that sets in the confusion because wait a minute, you've been bending over backwards for them. Are you really that kind of insensitive, selfish person? You start second guessing, questioning yourself, and going to counseling really only adds to confusion. So three symptoms we've covered. There's obviously more of them, but let's take it to the next step that some people take at that point, and they start doing some research. And here comes a scary thought. Are you in a relationship with a narcissist? Because once they start doing research, they start seeing such things as like the symptoms of narcissistic relationship. Are you losing your sense of self? Yes. Are you changing your values? Like, let's say you are a person who doesn't believe in lying, but you find yourself lying to cover up random things, like you stopped after work and saw a friend and visited with them for a while, and then on your way home you feel like, well, gee, what if he feels there's something wrong with my relationship with my friend? And you end up telling him, oh, I had to work late today, even though you don't have a crime to cover up for. But you're changing your values of being an honest person, or at least being tempted to coming up with an excuse over things that really don't warrant an excuse. Let's say another common symptom of a relationship with a narcissist is that you start second guessing yourself. Like what I was just talking about. Am I really that caring? Should I be establishing this value of I have the right to have friends. What if that friend really is not a good friend? So he seems like he has a point. So maybe it's not a good relationship for me, and so on and so forth. But arriving to the idea that you are in a relationship with a narcissist is really a very scary thought. And there are different schools of thoughts. There are different opinions on that, where some people would say, oh, it's only very rare. It's only 2-3% of the relationships that are indeed a narcissistic type of relationship. And there are other schools of thoughts like mine, where we tell you, hey, it's a flipping pandemic. The dynamics of our society and the way that things have been set in motion for us after the Industrial Revolution onset is creating a very unhealthy dynamic in our culture, to where it leads to overwhelming rise of narcissists. But let's not get into who is right and who is wrong here. What's important here is that regardless of how you define it, what you define as a narcissistic relationship, if you suspect you're in one, the only outcome and the only advice out there is that if you determine that you are in a narcissistic relationship, your relationship is doomed. Your only solution is to leave that relationship, because it will likely end in abuse, and you end up leaving anyway, just depending, if you leave while you're still together, or if you leave when you're destroyed psychologically or even physically. So a realization of that, or not so much realization, but it's kind of served to you. It's like, hey, if you're in a relationship with a narcissist, then you gotta leave. It's very hard for most of us to accept this, because we care about that person and we really don't want to leave at that point, or a lot of times can't. And so what this leads to is nothing but denial. I cannot be in a relationship with a narcissist, because if you were to admit you are, then your advice is to leave, and that's not what you're ready for. However, um, those kind of relationships have very interesting dynamics that a lot of professionals overlook today. interestingly enough, and unfortunately for people who are told to leave. So, number one, let me put your mind at ease. Even if it is a narcissistic relationship, you do not have to leave, contrary to popular belief. There are ways of dealing with that. But I'm not going to go into an explanation of that part here because I want to talk about the relationship itself. And this is how I define relationship X, what I'm going to explain here shortly. Um, and in the mainstream psychology, it oftentimes does get labeled as a narcissistic relationship. So there is a correlation here, but correlation is all that it is. So I don't want to talk about narcissistic relationships the way everybody else talks about them. I want to talk about a relationship X. And so relationship X has very interesting dynamics. Number one, you are in this relationship with all the symptoms that I've described, as far as it being very stressful, as far as it being roller coaster, as far as what they say are symptoms of a narcissistic relationship, to where you questioning your values and your sanity and so on and so forth, all the negative ones as well. But you are in this relationship because where they see a narcissistic abuser, a person who is not responding to you emotionally and manipulating and gaslighting and causing all this stress, where everybody else sees a narcissist, you see a real person there. And where they see a manipulation, you oftentimes see his real motive. It's like, for example, hey, he got upset over me coming home late from my friend. So, yeah, it's probably controlling, it's probably manipulative, but I can see his reasoning. You know, he wanted me, he really wanted my company at home, he felt alone, and I wasn't there. That's kind of understandable. And this is, by the way, why counselors and marriage counselors side with them as well, because without having the context of the situation, they respond to their request. Hey, my feelings here are hurt, and she is doing this. So that's where they're coming from as well. The reason you feel like, wait a minute, is because you have a bigger picture. But again, that's not something that we're going to cover here. So, anyway, you see that a real person there. And when everybody else is telling you, like, hey, they can't treat you like this, you oftentimes find justification for why that happened. And when they're telling you, like, hey, he's just a callous, manipulative abuser, you think back on those instances when you had a lot of passion and you do see sincerity. And it's like, he cannot just be cold-blooded manipulator. There is more to my relationship. However, with all this, it remains that you have this feeling that there is something desperately wrong with the situation. And to back it up, you feel under a lot of stress and under a lot of confusion. So, what is going on here? And that brings us back to what the heck is relationship X. You're dating a vampire, literally. But dating a vampire can be very thrilling. In fact, we have a lot of movies to where just the challenge of dating a vampire is very invigorating. So, no, you don't have to leave. But what is important to understand about relationship X, again, a relationship X, as I've already shared, is oftentimes referred to as a narcissistic relationship. The difference here being is that when we call somebody a narcissist, it has a stigma of somebody who is devoid of feeling, who is a manipulator, who is an abuser, which is true. But I don't like to call that person a narcissist because I feel the term is very misleading. A narcissist is a person who is in love with themselves. And this person may act like he is in love with themselves. He wants all the attention. He wants you to serve on them and to serve them and them alone. He feels very jealous when your attention is diverted to your friends or even your own kids. He wants it all. He wants to take when it comes to love. However, he is not like that because he's a control freak and a callous manipulator. A person in that relationship is like that because he is an injured child, basically. And they see themselves oftentimes as an injured child if you talk to them, but that's actually legit. It's somebody who grew up without the love and attention in their childhood. Their self-esteem is non-existent. It's been destroyed through some kind of child abuse that they went through when they were growing up. Um, they feel like they never had love and they just can't get enough of it when it's around. It's like if you've been suffocating in a room, the moment somebody opens the window and lets in some fresh air, that's all you care about. That's all your attention is focused on, is just give me more. But everybody else looks at it and says, what's wrong with him? He can't focus on anybody else's needs. All he wants is to take for his own. And this is where we have a disconnect between a person who we call a narcissist and an injured child that they see themselves as. And this is why I prefer to use this term of personality X as opposed to a narcissist, because narcissist implies callousness, an overinflated ego, person who is into himself, and a relationship X, or rather personality X person, is yeah, the person who is terribly needy when it comes to love and attention, but they're not doing this because they're in love with themselves. They're doing this because they feel they never had enough of it. Kind of like that person gasping for air by the window, not because he wants to hog all the air, but because he sincerely feels the need for it. However, when it comes to the dynamic of your relationship, this is what you have, is you have someone who wants your attention all for themselves and who tries to control you to give them that attention. Whether they do it deliberately or subconsciously is really irrelevant, because you end up waiting on them and serving them, and nothing that you give is ever enough. And to add insult to injury, or rather injury to insult, they oftentimes assert their demands by being very controlling. They try to separate you from your friends. They try to get you to do things that you may not want to do. And as they're focused on gasping for that air for themselves, they are not able to give to you and step aside, figuratively speaking, and say, hey, dear, get some air. They're not capable of reciprocating emotionally in that way. So you're literally dating a vampire here. They are an energy vampire. They suck that energy from you continually. But even if we think about all the stories about vampires that we read, how do people become vampires from the literature? Um, Usually we hear stories of it somebody who, they catch a person, right? And, they rape them, they beat them, they torture them, and the person turns into vampire. Well, that is exactly what happens on the psychological level. This is how that person became a vampire. And they don't want to be one. They would rather free themselves from that and become a human. And deep down inside, they're even hoping that you are that savior for them. And, they're kind of reaching out to you subconsciously. It's like, hey, I want to be a human. Free me. I don't want to be a vampire. But they're still a vampire. There's still an energy vampire to you. So this is the predicament that you're in when you are in a relationship X. Dating a vampire is a pain in the neck. It's extremely stressful. But do you know why it's a pain in the neck, right? Because they go for your jugular vein. And they do. And they do. And so we can talk about emotional vampires, but it's like anything, we start with the emotional realm. We start with subconscious realm, like thought, I'm going to kill him. That's thought level of a certain action. If we let it grow, it becomes physical action where, you actually proceed to kill them, or if you're that type of person, right? So everything starts at the emotional thought energy level, and then as it grows, it can transcend to physical. So our vampires, and I don't mean like, real vampires, but all your serial killers, all your, real abusers start by being personality X. So yes, it can develop from physical or from emotion level to physical manifestation of that. Emotional abuse can transcend into physical abuse and often does, and it all grows from that person being a personality X. So just because we acknowledge that they're an injured child and they were made that way, the danger is still there. And so if you are in a relationship X type of situation, remember you're dating a vampire. And you can take the challenge and you say, hey, I find this thrilling. I want to be there and I want to, kind of Beauty and the Beast type of thing. I want that person who will finally give him that final kiss that will turn him from a beast to a real person. Yes, it's doable. We have techniques for that, by the way. Mainstream will tell you we don't know how. Well, we happen to know how. So that is doable. Um, or you can say, you know what? I don't want to be in this danger. I don't want to live with a person who can go for my jugular vein at some point in time. I want to leave. And then you make your decision and you leave, which, by the way, one of the interesting dynamics of relationship X is that those relationships are very hard to leave. It's very counterintuitive. You may see, like, I'm done, I'm scared, I want out of it, and you just can't get out. So that's one of the dynamics, and that's sometimes where you need to seek help also. But the bottom line is that yes, you can stay in this relationship and you can free that person, you can help them to turn back to human from being a vampire, or you can leave and it's your choice. Don't guilt yourself into you have to stay there for them if you don't want to, because again, dating a vampire is a pain in the neck. It's very stressful. And if you're not up for the challenge, you will never be. And you may as well, start working on getting yourself out of that situation. But what's important, what's crucially important to realize is that relationship X is not a normal relationship. You cannot treat it as a normal relationship. And I have videos explaining the difference between normal and not normal. I strongly encourage you to watch those because the first reaction I get is, oh, what's normal? Define normal for me. What's normal for you is not normal for me. Please get down to the bottom of what normal means, or at least the term normal that we use, how we define that term, because that is going to be very crucial to your success. To you leaving without being hurt by an abuser who's going to chase you down, and actually being able to leave, or staying in an abusive relationship or relationship that can and will become abusive. And whether you're going to be on top of things, somebody who is conquering dragons, slaying monsters, and turning vampires into human, or if you're going to be someone who is going to be sucked dry by an energy vampire and left, uh, hag who is emotionally destroyed, financially destroyed, and looks back and says, I've wasted all my life and now I have no future and nothing to show for it. This is very important. The first step is to realize that relationship X is not a normal relationship and it needs to be treated as such. There are certain ways and there are certain dynamics that you need to utilize if you're in a relationship X. You can leave, but again, they're not easy to leave, so you need certain dynamics in place to do so. But especially if you're going to stay, you cannot treat relationship X as a normal relationship. And if everything inside you rises to argue what's normal, please make that your second step is realizing what we define as a normal relationship, what normal means, and kind of ground yourself in that before you go any further. Thank you so much. I hope to see you soon again.